Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to open your eyes in a world where every street has been walked for thousands of years, where even silence feels old? Tonight, you are here. In ancient Rome, around 200 AD, during the height of the Roman Empire, a city that stretches across continents filled with millions of lives. Yet right now, it is still early morning, and everything is just beginning to wake. A soft, pale light slowly spreads over the rooftops of tightly packed buildings known as insulae. These tall, narrow apartment blocks stand close together, forming winding streets below where ordinary Roman citizens live their daily lives. Inside one of these small homes, you are there. The air feels slightly cool, calm, settled after the long night. Your room is simple, not rich, not decorated, just what is needed for daily life. A wooden bed, a clay water jug, and a small opening where the first light of dawn gently enters. Outside, the city has not fully awakened yet, but it is no longer asleep either. A distant wooden door creaks open somewhere below. Soft footsteps echo on stone streets. A rooster calls out, breaking the early silence. You lie still for a moment longer, because in this time, mornings are not rushed, they are felt. Slowly, life begins to rise outside your window. You can sense it even before you see it. Movement returning to the streets. People preparing for work. The quiet rhythm of a city that never truly stops. Then, you decide to stand. You move toward the door. A narrow wooden staircase leads downwards, worn smooth by countless footsteps over many years. Each step you take feels connected to the lives of those who came before you, and when you finally step outside, the world changes instantly. The air feels more open here, even in narrow streets. Sounds are clearer, closer, more alive. You hear the soft scraping of wooden shutters being pushed open. You hear neighbors exchanging quiet morning greetings. You hear the distant rhythm of life beginning again. A baker is already preparing his oven. The smell of fresh bread drifts gently through the street. A merchant begins arranging clay pots outside his shop. A child runs past without urgency, as if the day is too young for rules. Above you, tall buildings rise on both sides, blocking most of the sky. The street feels like a long stone corridor where life flows slowly forward, one step at a time. You begin to walk, slowly, not because you are late, but because nothing demands speed. This is ancient Rome, 200 AD, a world where life unfolds in layers, not seconds. And as you take your first steps into the morning street, you begin your day in a city that has just started to breathe. The moment you step fully into the street, the world of ancient Rome around 200 AD feels a little more awake. Not loud yet, not crowded, but slowly coming alive like a city gently stretching after sleep. The narrow stone road beneath your feet is already warm in some places where the early sunlight touches it. Small cracks between the stones hold traces of yesterday, dust, footsteps, forgotten movement. You begin to walk forward. On your left, a wooden shop door slides open with a slow groan. A baker steps out first, rubbing his hands as if preparing for another long day. Behind him, the heat of the oven escapes in soft waves, carrying the fresh bread into the morning air. Warm, simple, comforting. A few steps ahead, another shop begins to open. Clay pots are carefully placed outside, one by one. A merchant adjusts them with quiet focus, making sure nothing falls, nothing breaks. Every movement feels practiced, repeated every morning for years. You notice how everyone moves with a certain calm routine. No rush, no chaos, just life continuing. As you walk further, the street slowly becomes more active. A man passes by carrying a woven basket filled with fruit. Two neighbors stop briefly to exchange a few words. Not loud, not emotional, just familiar morning greetings. A child follows behind a woman holding on to her robe, still half asleep. Above you, the tall buildings of Insulae lean inward slightly, making the street feel narrower, almost like the city is gently holding everything together. Light struggles to reach the ground in full strength, filtering between walls and rooftops. It creates soft patterns of shadow that move as people pass through them. You continue walking slowly. Every step reveals something small, something ordinary, yet deeply human. A man sharpening tools outside his doorway. A woman pouring water into a clay bowl. A dog lying quietly near a wall, watching without interest. Nothing here feels extraordinary at first glance, and yet everything is part of something larger. A living rhythm. A city that has existed for centuries, continuing its endless cycle of waking, working, resting, and sleeping. You pass another corner, and the smell of fresh bread grows stronger again. It mixes with the scent of smoke from cooking fires and the earthy smell of stone streets, still holding the coolness of night. For a moment, you pause, not because something happens, but because nothing is rushing you. And in this time, that is normal. That is life. Then you continue forward, deeper into the morning streets of Rome, where the day is only just beginning to unfold. You keep walking forward without stopping, and slowly the street around you begins to feel even more alive. Not suddenly, but gradually, like a city that never fully wakes all at once, but instead opens its eyes in layers. The smell of fresh bread still lingers behind you, but now it mixes with something else. The scent of people beginning their daily routines. Smoke from early cooking fires rises gently between the buildings, disappearing into the narrow strip of sky above. You notice how the rhythm of the street has changed just in the short time you've been walking. More footsteps now, more voices, more movement. Still calm, but growing. A man passes you by carrying a bundle of cloth over his shoulder. He doesn't look rushed. In fact, no one does. Even in work, even in movement, there's a certain Roman stillness, as if time itself is not something to chase, but something to live inside. You turn slightly as you walk, noticing a small gathering near a corner shop. A merchant is speaking softly with a customer, holding out small goods, simple items made of clay, metal, and fabric. Nothing modern, nothing complex, just things that support everyday life. The conversation is quiet, measured, words exchanged without urgency. You continue forward. The street narrows slightly, and the buildings feel taller here, leaning in closer. Light from the sky above becomes thinner, more distant, broken into soft patches between rooftops. Yet somehow the world does not feel dark. It feels enclosed, safe in its own way, like walking through a slow-moving corridor of history. A child runs past you for a moment, laughing briefly before disappearing around a corner. The sound fades quickly, absorbed by the stone and wood around you. And then, almost without realizing it, you find yourself approaching a more open space. The noise of the street shifts slightly, less enclosed, more spread out, more structured. You are getting closer to the heart of the city. Even before you see it fully, you can feel it. The change in atmosphere, the subtle increase in human presence, the deeper layer of activity beneath everything. This is where many Romans come during their day, for trade, conversation, decisions, and daily life that connects the entire city together. And as you step closer, the morning of ancient Rome continues unfolding around you, gently pulling you deeper into its rhythm, without ever breaking its calm flow. As you continue walking, The street begins to widen slowly, not all at once, but gradually, like the city is opening its arms as you move deeper inside it. The narrow stone corridor you were following starts to dissolve into a broader path. More intersections appear now, more movement from different directions. The sound of footsteps multiplies softly around you, blending into a steady morning rhythm. You are no longer in a quiet residential stretch. You are approaching the center of daily Roman life. The air feels slightly different here, not heavier, but fuller, as if every breath carries traces of countless conversations, decisions, and movements that have taken place in this same space for generations. Without realizing it, you slow your pace, not because you are told to, but because everything around you naturally invites observation. On both sides of the street, small clusters of people gather and disperse. Some are standing close together in conversation, speaking in calm tones. Others move purposefully forward, carrying items, documents, or simple goods tied in cloth. No one seems lost. Everyone seems familiar with this rhythm. You pass under a shaded section between buildings where the sunlight breaks into thin strips across the stone ground. In these quiet moments between movement, you notice how structured everything feels. Even the chaos has order here. As you step forward again, the space opens more clearly ahead. And then you see it. A larger, more open civic area begins to appear in front of you. Columns rise in the distance, wide pathways stretch outward. People gather in greater numbers, yet the atmosphere still holds a strange calmness, like a controlled flow of life rather than disorder. You are now approaching one of the most important places in Roman daily life, the civic center, where citizens meet, speak, trade, and observe the affairs of their world. Even before stepping fully into it, you can feel its presence. The energy changes again, slightly stronger, yet still balanced. Voices are more frequent here, but not overwhelming. Movements are more structured, but still unhurried. You pause for a brief moment at the edge of this space. Behind you, the narrow streets feel quieter now in comparison. Ahead of you, the heart of the city continues its slow morning awakening. And without any interruption, without any clear boundary, you simply continue forward, entering the place where Roman life gathers, connects, and unfolds as one living system, deeper into the rhythm of ancient Rome, around 200 AD, where your day is still only beginning. You continue walking forward, and the open space around you becomes fully present. The transition is not sudden, it is gradual, as if the city is slowly revealing another layer of itself as you step deeper inside. This is the civic center of ancient Rome, around 200 AD, a place where daily life gathers, not in chaos, but in structured movement. The stone beneath your feet feels more worn here, not uneven, but polished by countless years of constant use. Every step you take blends into the quiet rhythm of others walking around you. People surround you in different directions. Some move with purpose. Some stand still in conversation. Some simply observe the flow of the space, as if this moment is part of their routine. Yet nothing feels rushed. Even here, in the center of activity, time seems to slow down rather than speed up. You notice small details as you walk. A man carefully holding a wax tablet, reading something with calm focus before speaking to someone beside him. Another adjusting his clothing before joining a quiet discussion. A vendor standing at the edge of the space, waiting patiently rather than calling out, as if attention here is something that comes naturally, not forcefully. The air feels more open compared to the narrow streets behind you, but it is not louder, it is layered. Voices overlap gently in the distance, conversations about trade, daily matters, small decisions that shape ordinary lives. Above you, tall stone columns rise in steady alignment. They do not feel decorative, they feel foundational, as if they are holding not just structures, but the rhythm of the space itself. Light filters through them in long, shifting lines. As the morning sun rises higher, those patterns slowly move across the ground, marking time in a way that feels almost invisible. You slow your pace without realizing it, not because you are unsure where to go, but because the environment itself does not demand speed. You pass near a small cluster of people speaking softly. Their gestures are minimal, their expressions calm. Nothing feels exaggerated. Everything is measured: words, movement, silence. As you move further inside, the space continues to unfold in subtle layers. What first looked like a single open area now feels deeper, more connected, extending beyond what you can immediately see. It is not just a gathering place. It is a system of life where people meet, exchange, observe, and then slowly return to their own paths again. And as you remain within this quiet flow of movement and sound, the morning of Rome continues to develop around you, gently, steadily, without breaking its calm rhythm. As you move further through the Civic Center, the atmosphere slowly begins to shift again, not dramatically, but in a way that feels like the city is gently changing its focus. The open space behind you fades slightly into the background, and now you notice more direction in the movement around you. People are no longer just gathering or talking, they are beginning to act. This is the part of the day where ancient Rome, around 200 AD, transitions from early morning presence into daily work. You continue walking at a steady pace. On one side, a man carries a bundle of tools wrapped in cloth. His steps are calm, familiar, as if he has walked this same route countless times before. Nearby, another person carefully counts small items laid out on a simple wooden surface, organizing them with quiet precision. Nothing feels rushed. Even work here has a rhythm, not urgency. You pass by a small group of laborers adjusting materials for the day. Their movements are coordinated but relaxed. One speaks briefly, then pauses. Another nods slowly before continuing their task. It is communication without noise, understanding without excess words. The air carries a mix of scents now. Freshly baked bread still lingers faintly from earlier, but it is now joined by the smell of raw materials, dust from stone, and the subtle presence of smoke rising from small fires used for daily tasks. You notice how the light has changed slightly. The sun is higher now, spilling more directly into the open spaces. Shadows beneath the columns become shorter, softer, less stretched than before. Time is clearly moving forward, but still at a gentle pace. As you walk, you pass areas where people are fully engaged in work. A craftsman carefully shaping clay, a merchant arranging goods with methodical attention, a worker carrying materials from one place to another, steady and unhurried. Each action feels like a part of a larger cycle, not isolated effort, but continuous flow. You begin to understand something subtle here. Life in this city is not divided sharply between moments. It does not jump from one state to another. Instead, it transitions smoothly, morning into work, work into rest, rest into evening, all connected without clear breaks. You slow down slightly as you observe this rhythm. There is something calming in it. Even though the city is full of activity, nothing feels overwhelming. Every movement has its place. Every person seems to exist within a shared understanding of time. And as you continue forward, the civic space begins to feel less like a destination and more like a living pattern, one that carries you along as the day continues to unfold around you. As you continue moving through the city, the flow of activity slowly begins to change again. The steady rhythm of morning work is still present, but now there is a subtle shift in the air, a quiet heaviness that settles over everything as the day moves closer to its highest point. Midday is not just another moment in time, it is a turning point in the day's pace. You notice it first in the light. The sun is now higher, stronger, pouring down between buildings and open spaces with a brightness that feels more direct. Shadows beneath columns and walls become shorter, almost resting directly under objects instead of stretching outward like before. You keep walking slowly. The streets and open areas are still active, but the energy has softened. Movements are less frequent, conversations slightly shorter, and even footsteps seem to slow as the heat begins to settle in. You pass by a shaded area where a few people have paused, not resting completely, but simply stepping out of the strongest part of the sun. Their posture is relaxed, their breathing steady, as if the city itself is encouraging a brief pause in the middle of the day. A man leans lightly against a stone surface, eyes half-focused on the distance. Nearby, another person quietly adjusts a cloth over their shoulder, shifting it to block the sunlight. No one speaks loudly. Everything feels reduced, softened, as if the city is conserving its energy. You continue forward, but your pace naturally slows as well. The heat is not harsh in a violent way. It is constant, steady, surrounding everything evenly. The air feels stiller now, with less movement than the morning breeze. Even sounds seem slightly muted. Voices in the distance are still there, but they do not travel as sharply as before. They fade gently into the space between buildings, absorbed by stone and sunlight. You notice how life adapts without effort. Work pauses in small moments, conversations become fewer, movement becomes more deliberate, less frequent. The entire city seems to enter a shared understanding of this part of the day, a natural slowing, not forced, but accepted. As you walk, you pass through a narrower section where shade briefly covers the street. The temperature feels slightly cooler here, and for a moment, the contrast makes you more aware of how intense the sunlight is outside it. You do not stop completely, but you also do not rush. There is no need. Everything around you seems to exist in this gentle balance between activity and stillness, motion and pause. And as you move deeper into the afternoon of the Roman world, the city continues to breathe in its own slow rhythm, carrying the day forward without breaking its calm. As the midday heat slowly settles across the city, the rhythm of life begins to shift once more, not into silence, but into something softer, more relaxed, more personal. In ancient Rome, around 200 AD, the middle of the day often becomes a time of transition where work pauses and people move toward rest, conversation, and cleansing. You continue walking, but the atmosphere around you feels different now. The streets are still active, but less focused on labor. Instead, there is a gradual movement toward one of the most important parts of Roman daily life, the public bathhouse. You follow this flow without needing direction. It feels natural, like the city itself is gently guiding movement. Soon, you approach a large structure ahead. It is not loud or chaotic, but it stands with quiet importance, Stone walls, wide entrances, and open pathways where people come and go at a steady pace. This is a Roman bath complex, a place not only for cleaning the body, but also for resting the mind. As you step closer, the soundscape changes slightly. Outside, it is still the softened noise of the city, but near the entrance, you begin to hear something different. Echoes of water, low conversations, and the subtle sound of movement within stone walls. You enter slowly. The air inside feels warmer, not overwhelming, but comforting. Steam moves gently through the space, softening the light and blurring the edges of stone columns and arches. Everything feels slightly diffused, as if the world outside has been left behind at the entrance. People move calmly through different areas. Some sit and talk quietly. Some stand near pools of warm water. Some simply rest in silence, letting the heat settle into their body. There is no rush here. Time feels suspended. You walk further inside, noticing how the design of the space encourages stillness. The structure itself feels intentional, guiding movement from one warm space to another, from activity to rest. The sound of water becomes more present now. Soft ripples, gentle pouring, occasional echoes of footsteps across stone. You pause for a moment near a quieter section. Around you, conversations remain low and steady, never rising beyond a calm tone. Even laughter, when it appears briefly, feels controlled, relaxed, natural. There is something deeply human about this place, a shared space where daily life pauses, not to end, but to breathe. You remain there for a moment longer, feeling the contrast between the heat outside and the warmth within. And as time continues to move forward beyond the bathhouse walls, the Roman day slowly prepares to shift again toward its quieter closing hours. You step back into the open air, and the world around you feels gently transformed. In ancient Rome, around 200 AD, the transition from midday to evening is never sharp. It is a slow unfolding, as if the entire city is exhaling after holding its breath for hours. The heat of the day has eased, leaving behind a softer warmth that rests on stone streets and tall buildings. The sunlight is no longer strong or direct. Instead, it has begun to spread itself out, turning everything it touches into shades of gold and amber. You continue walking without direction or urgency. The streets are still active, but the energy has changed. The earlier intensity of movement is gone, replaced by a calmer rhythm. People move at slower speeds now, their steps less focused, their presence more relaxed. Some return from work. Some carry small items for the evening. Some simply walk without speaking, as if letting the day settle behind them. You notice how the city itself feels different in this light. Shadows grow longer along the ground, stretching between stone patterns and narrow paths. The spaces between buildings begin to feel more defined, as if the architecture is gently separating day from night. A soft breeze passes through the street. It carries the faint mix of scents from the day, distant smoke, warm stone, and the lingering trace of food being prepared somewhere nearby for the evening. You walk through a slightly wider section of road, where more of the sky becomes visible above. The color overhead is shifting slowly now, deepening from bright blue into a softer tone that signals the approaching end of daylight. A few people stand near a corner, speaking quietly. Their voices are calm, unhurried, blending naturally into the surrounding atmosphere. Nothing feels rushed anymore. Even conversations seem to slow down, as if matching the rhythm of the fading light. You continue forward, noticing how the entire city seems to adjust itself without effort. Earlier in the day, every space felt filled with purpose, work, trade, movement. Now, those same spaces feel more open, less defined by activity, more shaped by presence. The stone beneath your feet still holds warmth from the sun, but it is fading gradually. Each step you take feels slightly more connected to the evening that is approaching with every passing moment. And as you move deeper into this shifting light, the city around you continues its slow transformation, quietly preparing for the next phase of its day. As you continue walking, the change in the city feels almost unspoken. There is no clear moment when it happens, no signal, no announcement. Instead, it simply unfolds, slowly, naturally, as ancient Rome, around 200 AD, moves deeper into the evening hours. The golden light that once filled the streets is now softer, thinner, stretching longer across the stone paths. Buildings that once stood bright under the midday sun now appear quieter, their edges blending gently into the growing shadows. You keep moving at a calm pace. Around you, the rhythm of the city has shifted again. It is no longer the structured rhythm of work, nor the focused flow of midday activity. Now everything feels more scattered, more individual, as if each person is gradually returning to their own private world. You pass by a few figures walking in different directions. Some carry nothing, their hands free, their posture relaxed. Some move slowly, as if not in a hurry to reach anywhere in particular. Some walk in silence, their thoughts seemingly elsewhere. The streets are still alive, but the energy is no longer outward-facing. It has turned inward. You notice how even the sounds of the city feel different now. Footsteps echo a little longer before fading. Voices in the distance are softer, less frequent. Even the movement of people feels lighter, as if the weight of the day is being set down piece by piece. You continue forward through a stretch of road where the buildings open slightly, allowing more of the evening sky to appear above. The color has deepened further now, moving from warm gold into gentle tones of orange and fading blue. A quiet breeze passes through the street again. This time it feels cooler. Not enough to signal night yet, but enough to remind you that the day is slowly reaching its final phase. Nearby, a small group stands near a wall, speaking in calm tones. Their conversation feels casual, unhurried, not about work or obligation, but about small parts of life that belong to the end of the day. You do not stop, but you slow slightly as you pass them. The city around you continues to settle. Shops that were active earlier now begin to show signs of closing. Doors are partially shut, items are being moved inside, and the flow of movement along the streets becomes thinner, more spaced out. Everything feels like it is gently withdrawing, not disappearing, just returning inward. And as you continue walking through this softening evening atmosphere, the Roman world around you quietly prepares for the final transition into night, without ever breaking its calm, continuous rhythm. As you continue forward, the evening deepens without any sudden change. Night does not arrive all at once. It slowly gathers itself, spreading gently through the streets like a soft shadow learning the shape of the city. The warm tones of sunset are now fading. The sky above has shifted into a deeper blue, and the last traces of orange light cling quietly to the horizon, as if reluctant to disappear completely. You keep walking at an unhurried pace. The streets around you feel different again, quieter but not empty. The movement of people has thinned, yet life is still present in softer forms. Some figures pass by you in silence. Others move in small groups, their voices low and calm. Most seem to be returning inward, toward homes, toward rest, toward the private spaces of the night ahead. And then something subtle begins to change. A faint glow appears along the street, At first, it is just one light, then another. Small oil lamps are being lit outside doorways, along walls, and near entrances. Their flames are steady but delicate, flickering gently as they meet the evening air. You slow your steps slightly as you notice them. Each lamp casts a small circle of warm light onto the stone ground. Alone, each glow is small, but together they begin to reshape the street, turning the fading darkness into something soft and patterned. Shadows that once stretched long and thin now break into smaller pieces of light and dark, moving gently as people pass. You continue forward through this growing glow. The city is no longer defined by sunlight. It is now defined by flame. You pass a doorway where a lamp has just been lit. The person inside adjusts it carefully, ensuring the flame remains steady. Nearby, another light is already burning, marking the edge of a home that has begun to close itself for the night. The sounds of the city have grown quieter again. Footsteps are fewer now. Voices are softer, often ending quickly. Even the air feels more still, as if holding the moment carefully before night fully arrives. You walk through a section where several lamps line the street in uneven intervals. Their warm light reflects softly off the stone, creating a rhythm of brightness that leads forward into the distance. It feels almost like the city is guiding itself into darkness with gentle steps. And as you move deeper into this lamp-lit path, the world around you continues its slow transformation, carrying you closer to the quiet heart of the night that is just beginning to unfold. You continue walking deeper into the quieter streets, but tonight, something feels slightly different. Not in the city itself, but in what you begin to notice. In ancient Rome, around 200 AD, night is not just silence. It is made of small, hidden moments that most people would never think about during the day. As you pass a narrow corner, you hear a faint sound, a wooden bucket being set down. Slow, careful, controlled. You pause for just a moment and look toward the sound. A man stands near a doorway, not speaking, not calling anyone. He is simply adjusting something outside his home, a small daily task that only becomes visible at this hour when everything else has slowed down. He does not look at you. He does not react. It feels like you are both sharing the same quiet space without interruption. You continue walking. A few steps ahead, the stone ground feels slightly uneven, and your attention shifts downward for a moment. Small cracks in the pavement catch the dim light from a distant lamp, creating thin lines that disappear as you move. The city is still around you, but now it feels more like background than presence. Instead, your awareness moves between small details. A shutter gently shifting in the wind, a faint glow behind a partially covered window, the distant sound of something metal touching stone, then stopping. Nothing loud, nothing dramatic, just fragments of life continuing quietly. You pass another narrow passage where the walls feel closer together. Here, the air feels stiller, almost enclosed, as if the night itself is resting between buildings. A cat moves briefly across your path, stops for a second, then disappears into the shadow without hesitation. No urgency, no fear, just movement through familiar darkness. You continue forward without breaking your pace, and as you step out of the narrow passage again, the street opens slightly, revealing more scattered light ahead, not guiding you strongly, just marking where the city continues beyond what you can clearly see. The night remains deep, but now it feels less like silence around you and more like life happening quietly in layers you were not noticing before. And you keep walking through those layers without stopping. As you move forward, the street begins to feel slightly different again. Not louder, not quieter, but more distant in a strange way, as if everything around you is happening a few steps away from your awareness. In ancient Rome, around 200 AD, night has a way of changing how sound travels. Things that would feel close during the day now seem softened, stretched, and quickly absorbed by the stone and space. You continue walking at the same steady pace. A few moments ago, there were small, close details around you, but now the environment feels more open again, even though the buildings remain tightly packed on both sides. You pass under a section where the street curves slightly. Here, the ground catches a faint reflection from a distant lamp, just enough to outline your path. The rest is left to shadow, not fully visible, but familiar enough to continue without hesitation. As you move, you notice a sound briefly ahead. Not loud, just present for a second. A door shifting somewhere far down the street, but by the time you try to locate it, the sound has already blended into the night, leaving no clear source behind it. You continue. The feeling is subtle but noticeable, as if the city is no longer presenting itself in clear, defined moments. Instead, it is giving you fragments that appear and fade without holding attention for long. A faint movement crosses between two buildings ahead. You only catch it for a moment, someone walking in the opposite direction, their outline broken by shadow and distance. Then they are gone. Not because they disappeared suddenly, but because the night simply does not hold details for long. You slow slightly as you pass another section where the walls feel closer again. The air here is still, and even your footsteps seem to lose clarity as they move forward. For a brief moment, you become more aware of your own presence in the space, not as something separate from the city, but as something moving within it, quietly integrated into its rhythm. Ahead, a faint opening in the street begins to appear again, where a little more of the sky becomes visible above the buildings. The darkness is still present, but it is layered now, not flat, not empty, but filled with small shifting impressions that come and go without demanding attention. And you continue walking through this layered night, where nothing fully ends, nothing fully begins. It simply flows forward in silence. As you continue forward, the street slowly begins to open again. Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, almost unnoticed widening, where the tightly held walls on either side ease just enough to let the night feel less enclosed. In ancient Rome, around 200 AD, even the structure of the city seems to change slightly depending on where you stand and how you move through it at night. You step into this more open stretch without stopping. Above you, a small portion of the sky becomes visible again. Not bright, not filled with stars clearly, but a deeper shade of darkness that feels more expansive than the narrow corridors behind you. The air here feels slightly different, not fresher, but less compressed. You continue walking, and the sound of your steps changes subtly with the space. In the narrower streets, every step felt contained. Here, the sound has a little more room to exist before fading. Ahead, a faint glow appears near the edge of the street. Not strong enough to guide sharply, but enough to suggest presence. As you approach, you notice it comes from a single oil lamp placed near a doorway. The flame is steady, protected from wind by its position, casting a small, warm circle onto the stone ground. Within that circle, nothing else seems important, just light, stone, and stillness. You pass it slowly. No one is standing nearby, no conversation, no movement drawing attention, only the quiet assurance that behind the door, life continues in its own contained way. As you move beyond the lamp's reach, the light fades behind you, and the street returns to its softer, darker tone. But the sense of space remains. You continue through this more open section, where the buildings are slightly less close together, and the night feels less like a tunnel and more like a wide, quiet path stretching forward. A distant sound appears for a moment, something indistinct, like movement far away between streets, but it never becomes clear enough to identify before it disappears again into the surrounding silence. You do not stop to search for it. Instead, you simply keep walking, allowing the night to remain what it is, not fully defined, not fully silent, but gently shifting as you move through it. And ahead, the street continues onward, carrying you deeper into the calm structure of the sleeping city. As you continue forward, something subtle begins to change in the atmosphere around you. Not the darkness and not the light, but the feeling of movement itself. In ancient Rome, around 200 AD, there are moments in the deepest part of the night when the city no longer feels active in any visible way. It feels paused, not frozen, but simply resting between breaths. You walk slowly through the street. The space ahead is still defined by stone buildings and narrow paths, but now even those structures feel more distant, as if they belong less to motion and more to stillness. Your footsteps continue at a steady rhythm. One, then another, then another. Each sound briefly exists and then fades completely, without echo or return. You pass through a section where the street bends slightly again, and for a moment, your view narrows between two tall walls. The darkness here feels deeper, not because it is heavier, but because there is less interruption. Fewer lamps, fewer reflections, fewer signs of anything happening nearby. Yet it does not feel empty. It feels full in a different way. Full of unseen presence. You continue forward and notice how your attention begins to shift inward, not toward thoughts, but toward awareness itself, the act of moving through a place that is no longer offering distraction or change. A faint light appears ahead again, but it is distant and weak, barely touching the edges of the street. It does not guide strongly, it simply exists, marking that somewhere further on, life is still quietly present. As you approach, the light does not grow larger. Instead, you pass near it and leave it behind almost immediately, as if it was never meant to hold attention for long. There is no urgency in anything you do, no decision beyond continuing forward. The buildings around you remain closed and still, no visible movement from inside, no sound escaping, only the quiet assurance that behind every wall, life is resting in its own contained rhythm. You move through this space where nothing demands response. No conversation, no interruption, no change in pace. Just the steady continuation of walking through a world that has fully settled into night. And as you proceed deeper into this stillness, the city remains around you, not active, not silent, but existing in a calm balance where even movement feels like part of the quiet itself. As you continue walking, the street begins to narrow again. Not suddenly, but gradually, as if the city is gently guiding you into a more enclosed stretch where space itself feels more concentrated. In ancient Rome, around 200 AD, the layout of the streets often shifts like this, open sections followed by tighter corridors, each carrying a slightly different feeling of movement and sound. You step into this narrower passage without hesitation. The buildings on both sides rise closer now, their stone surfaces absorbing most of the remaining light. The sky above is reduced to a thin strip, barely visible between rooftops. The air here feels stiller, not heavier, just less disturbed. You continue forward, and your footsteps seem to blend more quickly into the surroundings. Each step exists briefly, then disappears without echo, as if the passage itself is absorbing sound. A faint change catches your attention ahead. Not movement, but temperature. A slightly cooler patch of air flows through the narrow corridor, passing between the walls in a soft, invisible wave. It moves through you for a moment, then continues onward without altering anything else. You do not stop, you simply continue through it. On one side, a small opening between two structures reveals a glimpse of a closed interior courtyard. No activity is visible, but the space feels occupied in a quiet way, a place paused, not abandoned. As you move past it, the opening disappears behind you again, and the corridor returns to its enclosed form. There is a sense here that everything is held very close. Sounds, light, movement, all compressed into minimal expressions, none lasting long enough to fully define themselves. Ahead, a faint glow appears again, weaker than before, almost lost within the surrounding darkness. It does not grow as you approach, it simply remains where it is, a quiet point in the distance. You continue toward it at the same steady pace. The stone beneath your feet feels more uniform now, less varied than the wider streets earlier. The repetition of steps becomes almost meditative, not requiring thought or adjustment. And as you move deeper into this narrow passage, the world around you seems to reduce itself further, not into emptiness, but into simplicity, where only essential presence remains, and everything unnecessary has already faded into the night. As you move forward, the narrow passage begins to slowly open again. Not quickly, but in a gradual release, as if the city is easing you out of a tight space and into something broader without ever breaking its calm. In ancient Rome, around 200 AD, even the deepest night is not one uniform condition. It shifts gently depending on where you stand, what surrounds you, and how far you've moved from the heart of activity. You continue walking. The walls on either side no longer feel as close. Small gaps begin to appear between buildings, allowing faint traces of the night sky to return above you. The darkness here feels different again, less compressed, more open. You notice how your steps sound slightly clearer for a moment, then soften again as the ground changes subtly beneath you. Ahead, a faint point of light appears. Not strong enough to guide the entire path, only enough to mark a direction that continues beyond what you can clearly see. You approach slowly. As you get closer, you realize it is another oil lamp placed near a doorway, but this one feels more distant from the street than others you passed earlier. Its light reaches only a small area, leaving most of the surroundings untouched. You walk past it without stopping. No movement inside, no visible presence outside. Only the steady flame holding its position in the night, as if guarding the boundary between inside and outside. Once you pass, the light fades behind you again, and the street returns to its softer, wider darkness. The space now feels more open than before, but also quieter in a different way. Not because something changed suddenly, but because fewer and fewer details remain to notice. You continue forward, and the sense of direction becomes more subtle. There are no strong visual markers now, only the continuation of the path itself, shaped by faint outlines and memory of movement. Occasionally, a distant sound appears, too soft to identify, and disappears almost immediately, as if the night is choosing not to hold on to it. You do not search for meaning in it. you simply move. The buildings around you remain closed and still. No light spills outward anymore. Everything is contained fully within itself, leaving the outside world to exist in uninterrupted quiet. And as you proceed through this final visible stretch of street, the Roman night continues to hold its deep stillness around you, not ending, not changing, but simply extending forward into a calm that feels endless and undisturbed. As you continue forward, the character of the street begins to shift once again. Not in a way that is clearly noticeable at first, but slowly, through subtle changes in space and silence. In ancient Rome, around 200 AD, different areas of the city carried different nighttime rhythms. Some remain slightly active deep into the night, while others fall into complete stillness much earlier. You are now moving into one of those quieter districts. The buildings feel more spaced out here, not wide open, but less tightly packed than the narrow passages behind you. This creates a different kind of silence, one that feels less enclosed and more spread out across distance. You continue walking at the same steady pace. The faint lamps that once appeared regularly are now rare. When one does appear, it feels isolated, standing alone rather than part of a continuous path of light. You pass one such lamp. Its flame is small but steady, casting a soft circle on the ground. No movement is visible around it. The doorway beside it remains fully closed, as if the light exists only to mark presence, not activity. As you move past, the glow quickly fades behind you, and the surrounding darkness expands again. The street ahead feels longer now. Not physically longer, but less segmented. Fewer interruptions, fewer visual anchors, more continuous shadow stretching forward. You notice how sound behaves differently here. Even your footsteps seem to travel a little farther before disappearing, yet nothing echoes back. It is as if the space accepts sound briefly, then releases it into silence without return. A soft breeze passes through the open sections of the street. It moves gently between buildings, carrying no distinct scent or direction, only a sense of movement that does not disturb anything it touches. You continue forward without hesitation. The sense of human presence is still there, but now it is almost entirely hidden, behind walls, behind shutters, behind the stillness of closed homes. Nothing spills outward anymore. The city is fully contained within itself. Ahead, the street seems to widen slightly again, though it is difficult to tell in the darkness. The transition is subtle, felt more than seen. You move toward it slowly, and as you enter this quieter edge of the district, the Roman night continues to stretch forward in complete calm, not offering changes, not demanding attention, but simply existing in a steady, uninterrupted silence that carries on beyond what you can clearly see. Not suddenly, but in a gradual thinning, as if each step forward removes another layer of presence from the world around you. In ancient Rome, around 200 AD, there are hours of the night when even the quieter districts begin to release their final traces of activity, leaving only the essential structures of the city behind. You move through this space slowly. The buildings still stand on both sides, but they feel more distant now, not in location, but in attention, as if they are no longer part of anything actively happening. The few remaining lamps are now very far apart. Each one appears alone, briefly illuminating a small section of wall or ground before fading back into darkness as you pass it. You walk through one such light. It reveals a doorway that is completely closed, its surface still and unchanging. No sound comes from inside, no movement visible, only the quiet confirmation that life continues beyond what can be seen. Then you leave it behind, and the light disappears again. The street ahead feels longer and less defined. Without frequent lamps or visible activity, the space begins to feel continuous. No clear segments, no strong markers, just a steady path extending forward into shadow. Your footsteps remain the only consistent rhythm. Each one briefly exists, then dissolves into silence without echo or reflection. A faint breeze moves through the street again, passing between the buildings in a soft, almost careful motion. It does not change anything, it simply passes through, as if the night itself is breathing gently. You continue forward. There is no sense of urgency, no expectation of arrival, only movement through a space that no longer offers distraction or interruption. Even distant sounds are almost completely gone now. If they appear at all, they are so faint they cannot be traced or followed. The city feels fully inward at this point. Everything that was once open, trade, conversation, movement, now exists behind walls and within closed spaces that do not extend outward anymore. You pass another stretch where no lamp is visible at all. For a moment, there is only darkness ahead and the steady continuation of your steps. Then, far in the distance, a faint glow appears again. Not strong, not guiding clearly, just present enough to suggest that the city continues beyond what you can immediately perceive. You move toward it slowly, as the night remains deep and undisturbed around you, holding everything in a quiet balance where even emptiness feels complete.
In ancient Rome, around 200 AD, there is a final stage of night where even the smallest traces of movement fade, and the city enters its deepest, most complete stillness. You walk slowly through the street. The faint glow that appeared in the distance earlier is now barely visible. It no longer feels like a destination, just a quiet reminder that the city still exists beyond what your eyes can clearly hold. Everything around you is reduced to its simplest form: stone, shadow, air, presence. The buildings on either side are no longer defined by detail. Their shapes are present, but softened, blending into the darkness in a way that makes them feel almost timeless. You continue walking at an unhurried pace. Your footsteps are now the only clear rhythm in this space, and even they feel lighter, as if the night is gently absorbing them before they fully settle. No voices remain. No movement is visible. Even the distant hints of life behind walls are no longer noticeable. The city has fully turned inward, completing its daily cycle without interruption. A faint breeze passes through one last time. It moves slowly between the structures, then disappears without effect, leaving the air unchanged behind it. You do not stop. You simply continue forward through the silence. There is no longer a sense of direction in the usual way, only continuation. The path exists because you are walking it, and it continues only as far as your presence allows it to be experienced. The darkness is complete now, but not heavy. It feels balanced, like something that has naturally reached its final state. No beginning, no ending, just stillness. And as you move through this final stretch of night, the Roman world remains around you in perfect quiet, resting, hidden, and deeply calm, as if the entire city has finally slipped into a shared breath that lasts through the darkness, holding everything in place without needing to change anymore.